countdown to the last comic shop in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Hey! Welcome back to more of the last comic shop!
That's right, we are opening the shop up to newbies to help them find their way underneath this giant comic book tent.
Although this week, we're not really opening the shop for newbies as much as we're opening the shop for comic creators.
Whoa!
We kind of closed the shop and we went to a Comic Con. So if you went to the shop this week, just ignore our sister there working the counter who doesn't know anything. She's just helping out.
Again, we try to educate everybody on comic books. We give her things to read, and she just says, no, I refuse. If it's not Archie, I'm not reading it. It's like, okay, you love Jughead. What can I say? Some people do. I'm the host for the most, Andy Larson. I'm joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott. And as Chad pointed out, and J.A. followed through with, we do have some interviews with comic book creators on today's program. Yes, I finally got through all of that wonderful footage. Not footage. What would they call that?
Tape.
Metaphorical tape? Metaphysical tape?
Scotch tape, duct tape, even quacks. But the stuff that we got from Baltimore Comic Con that Chad and I spent a lot of time working at just a couple weekends ago. And so finally on today's show, let's get some of those interviews that we cut with those terrific comic book creators out to our public so that we can get press passes in future.
That's right. Make no mistake. We do this podcast for the love and for free press passes and comic books.
That's right. So it's our time to pull our weight, to be the Clark Kent and the Lois Lane of your comic book universe and bring you the news straight from, I guess, the creator's mouth.
And by the way, thank you to Baltimore Comic Con for sponsoring us to go and collect all these interviews. Baltimore Comic Con.
It was really, really a great show. If you have an opportunity to make it to Baltimore Comic Con next year, highly, highly recommend it. So, J.A., which creator would you like to hear first?
How about Russ Braun?
Oh, yes, our good friend Russ.
Ooh.
It's been a couple...
From The Boys and Batman and Where Monsters Dwell.
Right, Jimmy's Bastards. Lots of great stuff Russ Braun has drawn over the years, and he's a really, really great friend of ours, and we had an opportunity to talk with him at Baltimore Comic Con. So let's hear what Russ had to say. Hey, we are here at Baltimore Comic Con with one of my favorite people that does comics, and that is Russ Braun. Russ and I met for the first time several years ago back at Three Rivers Con in Pittsburgh.
That's right.
And I don't know. It's Christmas card. And so I'd like to think that we're good pals, but we wanted to make sure that all those Last Comic Shop fans out there knew what a great guy he was and what a great talent he is. And so the first question I've got you, and again, it's my slow pitch across the plate.
Oh, okay.
Which is, do you remember what the first comic book you ever got, Russ, was? Or the one that made the most impact of you from your youth?
I do. Actually, the very first one I got, I was a Spider-Man fan from the TV show, from the cartoon. But the first one I bought off the spinner rack when I was 5 in a Queens drugstore.
Okay.
Where we were going for like a soda fountain ice cream.
All right.
I'm old.
Did you have a chocolate egg cream?
No, I didn't. But I think I just had a root beer float.
Okay.
I think. But of all things for a kid to have
I found out that doesn't have chocolate nor egg in it. Well,
that's
there's
true.
chocolate,
No,
but it doesn't have egg.
Egg creams don't have eggs. That's true. But it was the issue, I think 95 or 96 of Iron Man.
Okay.
And Iron Man is fighting Blizzard, I think.
All right.
I'm thinking if it's not that one, it was the other one where Happy Hogan turned into the Freak, his friend. It was like radioactive, kind of like a Hulk guy, bald, with like his...
Yeah, no, I know what you're talking about.
But I'm pretty sure it's the one I'm thinking of with Blizzard on the cover and the ice is shooting up out of the... It's this amazing cover and just like... It just sunk me right away into
Do you remember
comics.
Who drew it at all? Or
I think that cover might have been John Romita.
Okay.
But I'm not positive. I know that Herb Trimp did the inside of the Happy Hogan one.
Okay.
But and I'm pretty sure Sal Buscema did the inside of the Iron Man one. Don't hold me to this.
That's okay.
You know?
Hey,
So,
you know what? We will not hold you to that, sir. But that's kind of cool.
That was the one I picked out myself. The first one I ever had was a Spider-Man.
Okay.
I think 136, something around there.
All right.
It was Harry Osborn takes over as Green Goblin. And they're kind of duking it out.
I think 137 is one of my favorite issues. It's the one where Spider-Man's swinging through a window, and he's got Mary Jane and May Parker, and they're on like two class tubes.
Oh, okay, yeah.
And he's like at the bottom of the screen. He's like, ah! And it's I think it's Ross Andrew. I'm pretty sure that's Ross.
Mine was the one before it where I think there's Peter Parker and Harry Osborn are facing off, and then in the background, there's Spider-Man and Green Goblin are exploding.
That's an iconic cover.
That's a Romita for sure.
Right.
For sure. But it was Ross Andrew inside.
Right.
Sure,
Absolutely. Yeah. So that was one of the first comics you ever got. What was the when you decided you were a comic book fan? Do you remember what was the first comic book you started following?
That was it.
That was
Spider-Man.
Spider-Man.
That was it. It was kind of like, oh my God, they have books of these. I thought it was just a TV show. Cartoons started with cartoons, went right to comic books.
Okay.
But I was always drawing. So.
Right. So here you're drawing, and I think you've told the story about how did you get, you were 18 and somebody passed your stuff to somebody else? And tell the story.
I was trying to get into an art college.
Okay.
School of Visual Arts in Manhattan is the one I wanted to go to. I didn't have any professional training. I had art class in a Catholic high school.
Yeah.
So my art teacher was Sister Janet. So and the highest form of art in her class was if you could copy something realistically, like a still life.
Okay.
And I mean, hey, that's a valuable tool to have.
It is.
All I cared about was making stuff up out of my head. So she didn't really care for my work.
All right.
But her brother-in-law was actually the president of the School of Visual Arts.
Okay.
So she agreed with me going there. She just didn't really help a whole lot preparing me for it. Okay. So my younger brother was in school up in Westchester.
Okay.
With one of his classmates was the daughter of Joe Orlando. Joe Orlando was the vice president of DC at the time.
Okay.
Old-time great comic artist, Mad Magazine back, and he and Wally Wood were a tag team art team,
right.
Just to do everything together. So I think a lot of stuff that gets just straight Wally Wood cred has a lot to do with Joe, and vice versa. So, but his name is much lesser known than Wally Wood. But so I'm always a good proponent of Joe Orlando because he did me a solid.
Yeah, he did.
So now what happened was I found out that I was going to go see Joe Orlando for a portfolio review so he could write me a recommendation. My mother met his wife in the supermarket and asked if he would look at my artwork sometime. So I went up there terrified. I just had sketchbooks full of drawings, random Spider-Man, and of course no DC Comics characters, all Marvel. And he's the vice president of DC. So he's looking at my stuff. We're sitting there just down in his study, and he's not saying anything. It's scaring me because but he's smiling.
Okay.
And I'm like, all right. And he looks over and he sees I'm nervous, and he kind of goes, "Oh no, don't worry. It's very good. You're good. We're gonna work something out. I'll write you a recommendation. I'm very happy to see this." He's like, and then he told me this horrible thing about. He said, "Let me tell you, the last guy who was sitting where you are right now. Let me tell you the story. He came there. He sat there. He said, 'How did you get here?' And he said, 'What do you mean?' He's like, 'Physically, how did you get here?' He said, 'I drove.' He's like, 'Oh, you have your own car?' He said, 'Yeah.' He said, 'You pump your own gas?' He said, 'Yeah.' It's like, you ever think about doing that for a living?" And, that was his critique of the gentleman's artwork.
Wow.
So if Joe liked your work, he really liked it.
He didn't pull
was
any
not
punches.
pulling any punches.
No.
So, I'm not that way. I can't. If someone shows me their artwork, I'm trying to find whatever positive I can about it, So
you're a nice guy.
I'm not belittling at all Joe's technique.
Right.
It's just not my way.
Exactly.
But when you find somebody like that and they do like your work, it's a real boost. Right. So, but yeah, he was my mentor early on. He said, "Come take my class when you're at the school." I couldn't take it till the second year anyway.
Okay.
But then he did one thing to me, though. I think this is what we were talking about.
I think so too.
He showed me. He's like, "Let me show you this guy's work." He was the editor for this. He edited Bernie Wrightson on Swamp Thing at the beginning of it.
Okay.
He's the guy who kind of put Swamp Thing together with Luen and Bernie Wrightson. So he shows me the Bernie Wrightson Frankenstein edition, and I'd never seen it before, and I was just stunned. Just looking at this, like my mouth just hanging open, and And this is like right at the end of high school. Like I'm 18. I'm preparing for a summer before I go to art school.
Right.
And I spent the entire summer trying to draw like Bernie Wrightson without having anything for reference, just like that memory of all these puffy shirts and things. So I was like,
huge sleeves.
Everybody I drew back then had these big puffy shirts, like they were in a Seinfeld episode. Yeah. So, but yeah. So I mean, and it didn't destroy me, but it did take some time away from where I was going with my own art.
Right.
And made me realize, okay, I'm not right.
Yeah, but that's a great segue to another story. Is the fact that again you started working at DC, and then the wonderful thing about what you've told me about your career is you've had some wonderful mentors.
Yes.
Like you've had an opportunity to work with some people, and Jose Luis Garcia Lopez. Let's talk about that because again, you have some good stories about that.
Oh yeah.
So
I'll go in order though, because I went to college.
Right.
I graduated college. I talked to Joe, and Joe said, come up, we're going to get you some work. And I went up and we did some work. So this thing called Ford Fairlane, Andrew Dice Clay was a movie. We did a prequel comic to it. I was just doing designs for the characters. And
I forgot all about the fact that
so they ended up using my designs as like a guide for the artists.
Okay.
And then the artist in the middle, Jose Delbo, left in the middle of it, and I ended up having to come in to do some penciling. So, but I wasn't really ready to do that, and we had a ridiculously tight deadline. So Joe Orlando got Carmine Infantino to do the layouts, and I would go over by Carmine, pick up the pages, and do the pencils over his rough layouts.
Okay.
So, and Carmine, I was terrified because I'd heard he had a tough reputation as a tough guy.
Right.
And Carmine was a sweetheart. He was the nicest guy in the world. And I learned a lot from working with Carmine right then. Then Don Heck and Frank Springer were the inkers. They tag teamed whatever. Like one would jump on one page, one would jump on the next page. Every time I'd finish one, I'd bring them up to the offices. They'd ship them out.
Okay.
But then, right after that, I did a Justice League issue with Keith Giffen and Mark DeMatteis, and that was a great experience too. And then the biggest thing was Batman.
Yes.
Batman, then Jose Luis Garcia Lopez, was the inker on Batman.
Right, and Denny O'Neil writing.
Denny O'Neil wrote it.
By the way, for everybody out there, it's called Venom. It's not the Venom you think of, but it's really, really good. That is the book that first got me to fall in love with Russ Braun's work. Because, like, seriously, it's a great, great, great story.
Well, it was a great learning experience.
Right.
And it's like a real classic kind of old-style story, like a pulp almost.
Yes.
I mean, there's a scene in it where Batman is fighting a shark with his shirt off.
Yes.
But yet it's considered a pretty serious story.
It is.
Because it's drug addiction, and Batman's addicted to steroids and controlled by the guys who feed him the steroids.
Right.
And he has to go into the Batcave and to detox.
But it's a very human story too, because like it all stems from the fact that he wasn't strong enough to save a small, I think it's a small girl. At the beginning of the story, and so like he starts beating himself up about that. And how can he be stronger and more and better at his job? It's actually a very relatable story, even though it's Batman. And so you got to work with them on that.
And Jose I would go up to the offices with the pages, and Jose would show me what he fixed on some pages or what he was going to change.
Okay.
And he would go over the pages with me, and he was very apologetic, as if it's like, I'm sorry, I want to do this. And I'm like, no, you're showing me how to do it right.
Right.
Little things that have stuck with me since I started that I still do today. Like changing the textures, the way you do textures, even just with a pencil. It's like a rock should not have the same texture as a tree.
That's true.
And he said it very gently. He didn't say it like mean.
Yeah.
But it was just kind of like, oh, that's a matter of fact thing to know, But and plus, I didn't mention I did my pencils over rough layouts by Trevor Von Eady.
Okay.
Because I had asked if Carmine could do it, but he wasn't available.
All right.
I had tried to do it myself, and my storytelling was not to par.
Okay.
I decided that, not the editor. He said, it'll be inked, it'll be fine. But I just wasn't happy with the way it turned out. I did like 14 pages, and I just ate them. I was like, I'm keeping this, and we're going to start again.
Do you still have them?
Somewhere.
Somewhere.
I don't know if each page probably has one drawing on it that I really like.
Okay.
But none of them flow, And I was drawing straight on the page, not using the light box yet, not using any kind of tools that will help you tell the story. I was just kind of going straight out, and everything was in the wrong spot or too big or too small.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
So, my
my characters always looked like they were too self-aware of the panel borders. You know, the panel border is cutting me across the shoulder, and I'm like, why is it across my shoulder? You know, so I hadn't really earned my acting wings yet.
Okay.
But so Jose would keep showing me. It had to be 4 or 5 times an issue, really. Maybe not quite that much, but I'd go up to the offices. He'd be up there. He'd be smoking his little black cigarettes, his little cigarillo type things. I was unfortunately a smoker at the time too, so we would actually sometimes stand outside and talk about things too. But in the one office, the editor you could smoke in there. He had an ashtray, so we would talk over cigarettes. Our pages smelled like smoke. Lots of inkers have told me that over the years. Like, I know when it's your pages coming in the FedEx box because it smells like smoke. But Jose was so generous with his time and his expertise, and so whenever I can pass that stuff on, I do too.
Well, I think that was what I was about to say. It seems like you had a really great experience with some mentors through your professional career, and it's really great to hear that you're taking that same time with younger artists or new up-and-coming artists to show them what you've learned. Because I think that's what life's all about, honestly. It's like if you have something that you can pass along to somebody else, you're better for it if you can do that.
Well, I think that's the thing we all have in common, whether we're artists or readers or podcasters, whatever you have. It's the love and the passion for the art form, for comics in general. You know, so you don't have to love the art form, you know, but I mean, like, we love comics. So if you can do something positive for the comics community, why aren't you doing that?
Yes.
You know? I mean, especially when all I have to do is be nice to somebody when they come up here to the table.
Right.
You know? If they have artwork, if they're an artist and they show me artwork, I'm going to take the time. 5 minutes. You know, to look over what they have and try not to just give them the standard. Oh, well, you want to work on your anatomy?
Yeah.
Everyone has to work on their anatomy. If you're trying to draw realistically, it's something you should know. But there's a lot of other stuff. My favorite one is about establishing the scene.
Yes.
And that's a Joe Orlandoism, which is like Joe would say to me, once a page, I got to see feet.
Okay.
And I looked at him like, is Joe like a crazy foot fetish guy? Or what's going on with this? And it was just his way of saying, reestablish to the next page. I'm like, but we know we're here. It's like, yeah, we knew we were there on the last page.
Oh.
But reestablish that. It's not like a hard, fast rule, but at least once a page you want to reestablish where your characters are if they're in the same location. Even more so if they've moved locations. You know?
Right.
So if you go from one page and there's 2 characters talking, and then you go to the next page and, they're now in Miami.
Yes.
But we never saw a panel with an airplane.
Right.
You know?
Then that's a jump cut.
Exactly.
And that is very jarring for the audience. It seems like it's common sense, but in some ways, some folks, that's something that until you hear it.
Yeah. So when they show me their stuff, I don't say the line. I tell them about that, but I don't go, "Hey kid, once a page, I got to see feet." You know.
Once a page, I gotta see some toes.
For the most part, I see people's stuff, and there's some incredible dynamism. If anything, I'm trying to tell them to ground themselves a little bit more.
Okay.
It's like nobody wants to draw backgrounds. Nobody wants to draw establishing shots. They want to draw everybody jumping around, and that's what I did too. So
you used to tell me the story about how before they had the internet and everything. You used to go to libraries and things, right, to get references for certain buildings and things, because you were kind of a stickler for. Well, if I need to know what a car looks like, I'm going to find out what that car looks like.
That's one of the worst things you can do is make up a car. I get away sometimes. I can make up animals somewhat.
Okay.
Because I've drawn enough of them now. But don't make up a car.
Right.
If it's a way in the background car, yeah, fine. But especially if it's a specific car.
It's a story that stuck with me, because later on I found out that Harvey Kurtzman used to be huge into that. When he did Two-Fisted Tales, every single piece of military hardware had to look like what it really looked like. You had to go to an Army of Surplus store and see exactly that's not the type of ammo that goes in that particular pistol. This type of ammo goes in that.
Well, yeah, luckily working with Garth, he doesn't care.
No, he doesn't?
No.
You do work with Garth a lot, and a lot of folks know about your work on The Boys, but I don't want to... No, everybody hears about The Boys, but I want to talk about your work on Battlefields.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Working with Garth, I started working with Garth on the war stories, Battlefields, and that was the first thing we ever did together. And he was very specific about the details of what the planes were, what the models were, what the years were.
Okay.
So if you're drawing a plane from 1944 and the story takes place in 1942, someone notices that and it takes you right out of the whole story.
Yeah.
You know. So I mean, it sounds like a minor thing, but it makes a difference.
No, it definitely does.
You'd be like, you got the right plane, but it's the wrong intake on the front. So that's the model for P40B, and we want the P40A. And I'm kind of like, oh, okay. And at first I was kind of like, oh, give me a break. What's a big deal? Then I looked at it, I'm like, oh, God. And now I know. Now I know the difference of all these different things. So
did you end up becoming more of a war historian yourself because of having to do the research a little bit?
A little bit. I wouldn't go that far, but I definitely I recognize it now. Yeah.
Okay.
So, and it was a great experience. I mean, the stuff, the stories, especially the Night Witches, is just a great storyline about Russian bomber pilots in World War II that were just a squadron of women that fought the Nazis from these little PO-2 biplanes, dropping a couple of bombs on them and trying to take off and get the hell home before they got shot out of the sky.
Would you say that's your favorite work that you've done with Garth over because you've done so many things?
For me, it's the most personal.
Okay.
Because it's such a great, like a real life story that we did our kind of fictional version of. So it's kind of touching and moving in that way because it's real. But it's definitely up there, and I love the boys stuff. I mean, I can't take anything away from that. There are a couple of issues of the boys that are my favorite things I've ever drawn. But we've done so many fun projects. Even like this one that's sitting right in front of me here, where Monsters Dwell is just balls out fun.
It's my comic book cover that you've signed that's on my wall because I absolutely love that. The issue 1 of that with the Phantom Eagle down in the one corner in the circle, and then like he's shooting at pterodactyls and like this biplane. It's wonderful stuff. So if you have an opportunity, I know that a lot of folks listening to this show, so you might have heard of the boys. Check out Night Witches. That's some fantastic work. Check out Jimmy's Bastard. Check out Where Monsters Dwell. These are great, great books that him and Garth Ennis have worked on over the years. What's next for you, Russ? What are you working on now?
Now working on Jimmy's Little Bastards.
Okay.
To Jimmy's Bastards. And we have 2 issues done. Last issue is being worked on, and it should be out in stores pretty soon.
Okay.
We'll see. The schedule's not great for me. I've been pretty bad about this one, but it's a lot of fun. It's a crazy fun thing. We killed Boris Johnson in the first issue.
Oh, no.
Small spoiler alert. We killed Boris Johnson in the first issue. I wish more people knew about that and cared about that, but
still, you know what? If you're behind on deadlines, it's because you're talking with me and a lot of our Last Comic Shop fans, and we appreciate it, Russ.
Sure.
We appreciate your time, and we hope that you have wonderful years ahead of you drawing fantastic stuff, and we're going to continue to be fans. So thank you so much for taking some time with me today.
Appreciate it. Good to see you again.
All right, so that was our interview with Russ Braun. Thank you so much, Russ, for taking some time to talk with us. And J.A., what do you want to hear next?
Well, I saw that Chad was showing off this really cool print that he got, which was basically a remake of that 1970s Marvel Here Come the Bad Guys cover.
Oh, yeah!
Who did that?
That was Mark Morales. It was an awesome update. He kind of replaced some of the bad guys that he thought had kind of become a little less popular, Mephisto and with like Thanos and things. But yeah, I actually got to talk with him. So let's go ahead and listen to that interview. All right, we are here at Baltimore Comic Con with Mark Morales. And Mark, how's the show treating you first and foremost?
It's a good show. It's my favorite show in the country, probably.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, it's comics, and more comics. They usually bring 1 or 2 media guests, but for the most part, it's an old school comic convention.
Yeah, no, it is nice for that, Beck. But for the Last Comic Shop fans, you know that what we like to do on this show is bring the talent to you, find out how they got involved with the business and like what comic books they like and everything like that. So first and foremost, the question I always ask is, do you remember your first comic book? Do you remember?
I do. It's Marvel Premiere number 26 with Iron Fist. Gil Kane drew it. Features a warbird and a crying kid, obviously.
That's the great thing about being at a con. You get all kinds. But no, like, you told me you got it at a summer camp or something?
Yeah, my older brother was a camp counselor. He's like about 10 years older than me. So
right.
We went to pick him up from his job there, and they stuck me in front of a stack of comic books to keep me busy till they, got him.
Right.
And I had been reading the newspaper strips before that, but I had never seen a comic book. I had seen like Spider-Man on Electric Company and all that, and was hooked ever since.
Oh, yeah.
Back then, comics were 25 cents, so for $1, You could get a lot.
Yeah, exactly. Do you remember any other comics that were in the stack?
No, I was just enamored with that one so much. I mean, I guess there was some Archie and stuff like that, but the superhero one got.
Right, okay. So that was your first comic. But what was the first comic that you bought, like, on the regular? Like, you had to go, like, okay, this is my monthly comic book now.
Well, this is back in the 70s. There were no comic book stores.
So
my father, I was living in the suburbs of New York. My father worked in the city, so he would pick up, like, every Friday, like, comics were 25 cents. He would buy from randomly at the newsstand on the way back home. So there was no consistency to it. I mean, one month I get an Avengers, another month a Batman. I never really were able to put together runs of them until later on. I mean, the 70s, so it was like, you had Jim Starlin doing Warlock. You had Avengers with, John Byrne and George Perez. You had later on the X-Men.
Right, yeah,
it's just that I could never piece together complete runs until a little bit later on when I started going to comic book shows.
Right. So did you ultimately decide that you were going to piece together some of those collections based on some of the original?
I did, and 30,000 books later, still going.
So what would you say is your prize part of your collection?
I don't know. It's not like I collect them for, I just collect to read them more than anything else.
Right, yeah.
It's not like getting them graded or anything like that, just for reading purposes.
Exactly.
But I mean, favorites were like, the usual ones, X-Men, Frank Miller Daredevil, Teen Titans, stuff like that. Like, I'm a mid-'80s kid for that type of stuff.
Okay. No, that's cool. How did you move from being basically a comic book fan to being a comic book artist? That's another question I always love to ask. So, like, how did you, make that transition? Like, what's your story?
So I went to art school of visual arts in New York City.
Uh-huh.
Had some teachers like Harvey Kurtzman, Gene Colan, Will Eisner, and Joe Orlando, Carmine Infantino, old school classic guys.
Right.
And went in there and took some classes with them, but I also studied animation. Got out of school, did animation for 2 years, and didn't really love it, so I put together a portfolio, came to a convention, and just got hired from there.
Wow! It's actually one of the most straightforward stories I've heard.
Yeah, it's not really circuitous at all. It really is kind of figured out what I wanted to do and just sort of worked about a year to getting a portfolio good enough to get it.
Right.
I was going to ask about some of your work you've been doing recently. Obviously, you're a great inker. You've had a chance to work on several super pivotal moments, whether it was Sick Captain America and Civil War, whether it was you've done a relaunch of the Avengers, Amazing Spider-Man 900 with the Sinister 7.
Yes, yeah. I've been pretty lucky to work on a lot of, I guess, pivotal stuff at Marvel. I was under contract to Marvel for 15 years, so I got to do Secret Invasion, I got to do Siege, I got to do the relaunch of Thor, did the Young Avengers stuff, and a bunch of stuff that's being made into TV shows and movies right now.
There you go. Does any of it stand out as favorite stuff that you're more proud of, or?
Well, I got to work with a lot of really good people. I think my favorite might have been Thor, the relaunch with Olivier Coipel and J. Michael Straczynski.
Oh, with the new costume. That was wonderful.
Yeah, because Thor was always a favorite with, back from Walt Simonson days. So that was fun to work on that. And Secret Invasion was maybe my favorite because you got to work with the whole Marvel Universe.
Well, as somebody that does the inking, I always ask this to inkers when they get the penciled work. Do you like penciled work that's you have to outline it, or the folks that brings you stuff, it's like you have to interpret it quite a lot? What do you prefer?
I tend to do both. I sort of work, I usually do a book and a half, 2 books a month. So it usually ends up where it is somebody that's really loose and then somebody that's really tight. So it sort of bounce back and forth.
Yeah, okay. But you don't have a particular preference one way or the other?
Not really.
Because I was always curious, because somebody that comes up with a very loose style, that means you have to fill in a lot of the blanks.
Sure, but it's a different thing. It's when it's more detailed pencils, it's more of a technical exercise, and when it's loose, it's a little bit more artistic. But
very cool.
They're both equally fun.
It's just one of those fascinating. I've talked with Wayne Foucher, and Wayne just simply said, "Hey, look, if I have a lot of time, then sometimes getting stuff that's a little loose, that's great. But if I'm on deadlines, that frustrates me to no end."
A lot of it's just scheduling, just making everything work in the schedule and the month, a lot of time to get the book done. So,
the last questions I have for you is simply put, one of the best pictures that you have on your table is this interpretation of Bring on the Bad Guys. You took that classic Bronze Age collection and you kind of modernized it. Where'd you get the idea for that? Where did you just look at the cover and you're like, dude, we need to update this?
Well, yeah, it was one of those deals where the Fireside books like Origins of Marvel Comics and Son of Origins and all that, they were like the original trade paperbacks, I guess, in the 70s. And all the covers were by John Romita Sr. and all great, all painted covers. And just like thinking of an idea for a print for a convention, I looked at that one, and it's like it had Mephisto and Abomination and Red Skull, characters that are sort of like out of vogue at the moment.
Yeah.
So I just decided to just swap them in with like Venom and Thanos and Kang for, it's just to modernize it somewhat.
Very cool. Where can folks find your work? Like, where are you on the social medias and things like that?
Twitter, I am at Mark_Morales11 at Twitter and Instagram.
Okay.
And I have a store, an online store, markmorales.bigcartel.com.
But can folks get that Here Comes the Bad Guys print on your store?
They can.
Oh, very nice. So make sure that you check that out, because let me tell you, I know it's a podcast, you can't really see it, but it is gorgeous.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for your time today, Mark, and we hope you have a great rest of your show.
You too.
Well, that was short and sweet, sort of like Chad's love of DC's New 52.
Yeah, but it was a great interview with Mark Morales, just simply because I was having a lot of fun with him. We had to stop and start that interview so much because there was this kid crying behind. I don't know. This parent was walking this kid around, and every time they passed by the booth behind us, you just heard. So we were laughing, and it was fun. So yeah, we do have to take a commercial break though, but we're gonna have some other interviews right after this commercial break. J.A., what do you want to hear after the commercial break?
Well, I saw that you met up with some of the creators that did books that we reviewed in the past year, sort of, for example, Gene Luen Yang. We did Superman Smashes the Klan. And I think you meant Ryan Dunleavy and Fred Van Lente, who did the comic book history of animation. So I would love to hear those interviews.
Yeah, absolutely. So right after these commercial breaks, we're going to have our interview with Gene Luen Yang, and then our interview with Ryan Dunleavy and Fred Van Lente that we did again. Thanks so much to Baltimore Comic Con for giving us this opportunity to do all of these great interviews. We'll be right back.
It was supposed to be a day at the beach. But for four friends, one wrong road will put them on a direct course to being the main course. Her name is Grandma Hazel, a chainsaw-wielding psychopathic cannibal, a beast of the backwoods with a body count higher than a bowl of blood-spattered Scotch mints. From the creators of Hocus Pocus, Grandma Chainsaw. Evil as a perm.
What if you could live with your favorite fictional characters and have a place to connect with the best nerdy neighbors and creators out there? Join us on your friendly neighborhood comic show. Every week, we keep hope, give help, and share comics with all. With games, interviews, and more, this isn't your average talk show. It's a living neighborhood. We are honored to be your CBC Comic Book Community Award-nominated nerdy neighborhood. So what are you waiting for? Come join the fun and join the neighborhood. It's your friendly neighborhood comic show every Sunday at 1 p.m. Eastern on YouTube.
Hazel always knew there was something special about her cat Mooney, but she's still shocked when Mooney opens his mouth to tell her he's just had a vision. An ancient evil has awoken after centuries of sleep, and only one man can stop it. The legendary warrior, Beowulf. Unfortunately, it's been over 1,000 years since he slayed a dragon, and he's been reincarnated as this guy. His name is Victor, and he's more unemployed millennial slacker than mighty warrior. Go to monarchpublishing.net for a free sample comic.
Hey, this is Andy Larson from The Last Comic Shop, and we are here at Baltimore Comic Con, and we have the tremendous honor to be talking with Gene Luen Yang. And you might have recognized that name because we covered Superman Smashes the Klan on a previous episode of the podcast. Gene, how are you doing this at the show so far?
Good. This is my very first time at Baltimore Comic Con, and it's pretty awesome.
Very cool.
So I'm from the West Coast. I live in the San Francisco Bay Area. I usually go to like WonderCon and San Diego Comic Con.
Right.
And those are awesome as well. But the thing I love the most about this one is it feels very, very comics focused.
Yes.
You know? Where everybody like reads comics and loves comics. Everybody you meet. Like nobody's here for like video games. Everybody's here for comics.
Right. Absolutely. absolutely. Now it's a similar vibe up at the New York Comic Con. I think that's because they're both on the I-95 corridor. You get like that same crowd that goes to both shows. But you're right. This is a great show if you like comic books, and that's why we're talking with you, because we love your comic books. And one of the questions we always have on the Last Comic Shop when we talk with creators is, were you a comic book fan growing up?
I was a comic book fan when I was a kid. So when I was very young, I wanted to be an animator.
Okay.
Because I always liked drawing and I always liked stories.
Right.
And animated shows, animated movies, that seemed like the way you would be able to tell stories by drawing. But then in 5th grade, my mom took me to our local bookstore and bought me a comic book off of the spinner rack.
Okay.
It was DC Comics Presents number 57.
All right.
Starring Superman and the Atomic Knights.
Oh.
You remember the Atomic Knights? You remember the Atomic Knights?
I sort of vaguely remember. I just like the fact that that DC Presents, one of my favorite issues from that is from Eternia with Death, Superman and He-Man. That's
yeah.
So it was great how they just they got Superman, but we'll put these other people in. So Atomic Knights.
Atomic Knights.
Wow.
Atomic Knights.
Very cool. Well, it's one of those things where we always love to ask that question, because you always see that twinkle in people's eyes when they start remembering.
Yeah.
So after Atomic Knights, what do you think was the first series that you really got into? You're like, look, I'm going to buy this every month or whatever. What was one of your first books?
So pretty quickly after that, I became a Marvel fan.
Okay.
Even though my very first book was DC,
Right.
I dove pretty heavily into Marvel. I really liked Fantastic Four. This was the era when She-Hulk was in the Fantastic Four.
Right.
And then I of course loved Spider-Man. So this was black suit Spider-Man.
Yes.
It was that time. And then when I got into high school, and especially after my comic book geek friend got his license, we would go it used to be every Friday.
Okay.
Right? It used to be every Friday, not every Wednesday. And I love the Hulk. I think the longest run I have at home in my long box is Peter David's Hulk. Yeah, I have a huge. He was my favorite.
Yeah. No, you've got some kinship with Chad Smith.
Peter David Hulk. I don't know. How did you feel whenever the personalities were fighting and then merged into Smart Hulk?
Yeah. That was was that 377? Yeah. I remember. Yeah, it was 377 that happened, right?
Yeah, with the fancy cover.
With the fancy cover. That was probably my favorite. That storyline. It was probably my favorite.
Right up until they got into the Pantheon, and that was fun.
Yeah. Pantheon was fun.
And then the Bachelor Party issue. Do you remember the Bachelor Party?
I don't know if I remember the Bachelor Party issue.
Oh, you need to check out the Bachelor Party issue. I think it's 418.
Was that Dale Keown or after?
It was right. It was 418 was right before Rick and Marla got married. It was Dale Keown.
Oh, okay. I must have that.
Yeah.
I must have that somewhere at home. I just don't remember it.
It's got a great image of Captain America looking at a stag video through his fingertips. And believe it or not, I tell everybody that's one of the few I guess after they lost the license to Rom the Space Knight, Rom shows up in that issue as his normal human self. Because they couldn't show him as the Space Knight because, Parker Brothers had taken back the license. But he shows up because evidently they were pals with Rick Jones? Question mark?
Rick Jones was in Rom.
Yeah, why not?
But anyway, I want to transition to your career a little bit, because you hopped on my radar with American Born Chinese, which was just super well received. And you've since parlayed that into a number of just wonderful books. We've already talked about Superman Smashes the Klan. The Monkey Prince is on fire right now. The new Superman you mentioned is popping up in other Superman titles. So how does it feel to be such an in-demand comic creator? What's the reception been for you?
It's been really surreal. It's been really surreal. When I was a kid reading comics, mostly Marvel, but I did read some DC as well. I would dream about working for those companies, and now to actually get to do it, to actually play in those universes, has been just wild.
Oh, yeah. To go back to Superman Smashes the Klan, you went back to the radio serials. And what inspired you to pick that as a story to go back to
I first heard about that from the book Freakonomics. So Freakonomics is this national bestseller. It's an economist and a reporter looking at different parts of human society through the lens of economics. They devote an entire chapter to the Clan of the Fiery Cross storyline from the 1940s Superman radio show. And the point of that chapter is that when Superman fought the Klan on the radio show, the membership of the actual clan declined, like significantly.
Right, they made them look so foolish in the story.
That's right. So, I mean, as a geek, as like a comic book geek, that kind of just goes to show when we're looking at stories about people wearing red capes flying around in the sky, it seems silly on one surface, but deep down it actually has real world consequences, right? It's about real things.
One of the other questions I had about that book was, like, I love the characterization of Superman in that book. And so there were some things that you did with his characterization that just, I mean, it just endeared me to it. But like at first, the fact that he doesn't fly initially. And the reason why he doesn't fly is because he doesn't want to seem like an alien. Like, he doesn't want to embrace his alien roots. And and at the end when he finally comes down and Lois is standing there and he's like, oh yeah, now I know. She's the one for me because she's the one standing and cheering me on. It not only tapped into that whole notion that Superman didn't originally fly. Like, when he was originally, he just jumped really high, and it wasn't until like either it was the radio show or the Fleischer cartoons that they developed flying as an attribute of his. So but how did that come about? Like, why did you want to tell that story too, as like side by side with the stories that were going on from the radio show?
Yeah, well, so I did a short run on Superman, a 10-issue run on the main Superman title, and when I was doing that, I started reading these old Superman stories. I'd only read like Superman comics from the 80s and 90s up until that point. And in those old stories, there's just lots of really fascinating dynamics. Like, for instance, he doesn't fly, he runs across telephone wires, and he's also like kind of a bully of bullies. They do all these like social issues in those early comics.
Yeah, absolutely. Like he won't hesitate to throw people off of rooftops.
Yeah, that's right. Like, or leave them on like deserted islands.
Exactly.
It's so weird. It's like a weird, given what Superman is like now, those old comics are just, there's an edge to them.
Right, and it was kind of wish fulfillment for kids at the time, because they were like, here's this adult that doesn't take guff from other adults and will like stand up and do these kind of things that we wish we could do. And so it's an interesting thing that you did go back and do that research and reconnected with his 40s roots when you were writing the story. So
yeah. And I think specifically with the Clan of the Friar Cross storyline, it shows how important he is as like almost like a national figure, right? Like I think Superman in a lot of ways is what we as Americans hope for. Like, he always kind of embodies our hopes. So that's kind of what I wanted to lean into.
Right, and one of the things as a reader that I pick up from your tool bag is you are very good at figuring out what is important and bringing that stuff to light. Whether it is, American-born Chinese and just exposing some of those cultural issues that kids have to deal with on a daily basis. I'm an educator, so I'm in middle schools, and I'll watch kids with that book all the time, and it's just... the connections they can make, it's just incredible. But I'm curious, and what do you have planned next, I guess? Any big projects that you're going to dive into, whether it's pulling out things like Superman and the Fiery Cross, or whether it's more personal things like the American-born Chinese?
Yeah, I have a few projects that I'm working on right now. So first, I'm writing Shang-Chi for Marvel.
Right.
We are putting him into a big Kung Fu tournament, because you have to, because he's Shang-Chi. And then for DC, I'm working on Monkey Prince, a monthly series. So he is a brand new DC character, but he's based on this old Chinese legend, the legend of the Monkey King. And he's going to play a big role in Lazarus Planet, which is a big event in 2023, headed by Mark Waid.
I wanted to ask you, how do you feel about Mark Waid playing with your character?
I am a huge Mark Waid fan. So first of all, to have him write a character that Bernard Chang and I created is a ton of fun. And just to see how he works is amazing. He's one of my favorites.
Right. Has he talked to you at all? Like, have you guys been collaborating?
Yeah, we've been talking on the phone and stuff. It's weird to talk to Mark Waid on the phone. It's like, yeah, that's surreal as well. And then I'm also doing a series based on the Clash of Clans video game and Clash Royale. So the thought there is, my kids really love video games. I have 4 kids, and we really want to build a bridge between these things that they play and reading.
Right.
We want to draw them into reading by using video game characters.
And you do a fantastic job. I know we've said it a bunch, but just connecting to the youth and finding stories, whether it's Dragon Hoops, which was a shocker for me. I didn't expect that coming out of you. But you really do a great job connecting with kids and getting them excited about reading these stories.
Thank you. Yeah, Dragon Hoops was kind of a shocker for me too. I did not like basketball when I was a kid, so for me to spend 5 years of my life working on a book about basketball, I was not expecting that.
Well, we hope wonderful things from Gene Luen Yang in future, and we hope that you'll come back to the Last Comic Shop some other time and talk comic book with us.
I would love to. Yeah, thank you, Andy. Thank you, Chad.
Thank you.
Hi, this is Chad from the Last Comic Shop podcast here with Fred Van Lente and Ryan Dunleavy, who are the best. Do you guys remember that time you did the comic book history of comics? That was awesome.
Yeah.
So, well, let's start with the comic book history of comic books because this is a comic book podcast. What inspired you guys to cast Jack Kirby as a main character and carry him throughout all the varying issues?
Well, I had attempted to do a Kirby biography a few years before Brian and I set out in the comic book doing this as a comic, and also expanding the subject beyond Jack Kirby. But I had basically had all the research, like I had this giant pile of research, so I had already done it. And also, frankly, Kirby's like the Zelig of comics. He was involved in, the early shops, the early comics. He and Joe Simon worked on freaking Whiz Comics #2.
Yeah, I did not know the Green Arrow or the Shazam stuff.
He did newspaper strips. He was one of the first people to ever do independent comics that were direct market titles. Oh, and he created most of and a significant portion of the Marvel and DC universes, respectively. So,
And even pre-comics, he was involved with, the Fleischer Studios and things like that. So.
He was involved. The treatment of him was sort of what inspired the creators' rights movements in the 80s. So he just sort of was a natural through line.
There you go.
And Fred's really lazy, so he had a lot of the work done already.
Nice.
It's like just make Ryan draw it. It'll work.
Some of it ended up in a musical.
No
I think.
lies detected.
Very cool. Now, Ryan, as an artist, what was it like having to deal with the entire history of comics and having to translate that into your own style and then putting it onto the page in a cohesive manner?
Like an idiot, I decided early on to try to draw every segment in the style of whatever it was, and that lasted till about page 2, and I just realized it was not going to happen.
You made page 8, I think.
Yeah, something 6. Like it. Well, it didn't even look, even then it was weak, and I was just like, no, don't even try, just go for it. And I don't know, I think it came out better.
Yeah, no, you definitely have a distinct artistic voice. I noticed you on, I want to say Wizard posters back in the...
a lot of Wizard work, and concurrent or before this, I think before Comic Book History of Comics.
Okay.
Or about the same time. It was about the same time.
Very cool.
That was why I wanted to do it in the same style. One of the things I was doing for Wizard were these parody comics, Sunday comics of Bloom County and Peanuts, but done in their style, but with X-Men characters and stuff.
Right. And Fred, I know I found you working on The Incredible Hulk and Incredible Hercules with Greg Pak. And that was wonderful. Do you have any more plans to work with Hercules or Amadeus Cho or anything in the future?
I don't, but Greg Pak and I are currently working on a new miniseries for a different publisher, but with a character owned by the same company. So go and figure out how that works.
I have no idea what he's talking about, honestly.
That's the thing we're doing, which is a lot of fun.
Interesting. Well, since I have you both, I should talk about the things you both worked on. And my first big exposure was Action Philosophers, which I have a philosophy minor, which is totally useless.
Got you here.
That's right. But it's one of the reasons why I love that book so much. How were you able to find so many creative hooks and to simplify the philosophy into such an understandable comic book page? What was that like? What were some of the challenges you encountered there?
Chad, it's because we're really good at this. That's the primary. that's the primary reason. Well, it has a lot to do with the comics medium, and because I think the philosophers are so abstract, it makes it you have to kind of go out and find it. You have to find some sort of clothes hanger to hang the visuals on. So you just kind of have to bust your ass and do it.
Yeah. If no one's complimented, it's next level stuff to take all that information and simplify it, and then Ryan to present it visually in a way that's not only here's all this information.
Fred writes so many words.
Yeah, so many words. But you guys made it so fun and so accessible. That was really awesome. So I'm just going to Chris Farley again. Let's talk about the comic book history of animation for a minute, because that's a book we covered on our podcast.
Awesome.
I followed the Kickstarter. Loved all the notes and here are the cartoons you need to watch.
Great.
So what?
Still live on Kickstarter.com.
So what inspired you guys to go into animation after philosophy and comic books? Why was that the next step?
I pretty much bullied Fred into it because, like every other nonfiction comic we've done, it was kind of his idea, and he kind of drove the bus. And this one, I was like, we should just do well. Why did we do animation? Was it because people were asking for more comic stuff, and they were like, we don't want to do that again? Or
a lot of it was just like seemed like an obvious sequel to the comic book series, which, to be blunt, was easily our most successful series. So we're like, let's do more of that.
And there was already a lot of animation material in the comic book.
And then Ryan beat me until I agreed to do it, but where you can't see.
Yeah, animation is really my first love, and I actually thought I was going to go into that field.
Oh wow!
Time I studied it in college in addition to illustration. But it just didn't work out, and I ended up in comics. So
he hits me where I'm soft, like a woman.
Anyway, all right. So lightning round. I'm curious, since you guys have done comic books, you've done philosophy, you've done animation. Who is your favorite comic book? Well, sorry, favorite comic book creators. Who's
Jack Kirby. I mean, Ryan Nutley. Well, I grew up in the mid '80s, so I was really inspired by the Alan Moore and Grant Morrison, those guys. And I loved probably my first love was Steve Gerber, who did Howard the Duck and the original Guardians of the Galaxy series and Man Thing and everything else.
I came into comics when I was like a teenager, and really the first artist that really spoke to me was Bill Sienkiewicz.
Okay.
It was the first time his New Mutants comics. It was like the first time I realized, like, oh my God, some human being drew this and thought of something crazy, and it's
so weird.
A story like nobody else is.
Yeah, it's so weird, so awesome. All right, favorite philosopher. Which one speaks to you the most?
Probably most like the Zen Buddhist and stuff. So sort of Lao Tzu, I guess, by way of Bodhidharma.
Nice.
A lot of later thinkers that didn't end up in.
I'm a later thinker myself. And Ryan?
Star Trek. Everything sucks.
There you go. You just thrust into existence.
Yeah.
All right, and animation. What's some of your favorite animated movies or?
I mean, I still go back. I remember seeing it in a theater in like 1990. I really love Nausicaa Valley of the Wind. It's probably my all-time favorite animated movie, anime.
Well, in this same, like, I would say Spirited Away is just kind of like the perfect movie for me, animated or otherwise. But also, I always go back to classic Chuck Jones, Looney Tunes stuff all the
shots
time.
of the theme park they've built.
Much like what happens after I read your books, I have things I need to Google now. I was unfamiliar with this theme park.
It's part of the whole Ghibli park they have out there outside Tokyo, near where the studio is.
Oh, that's awesome. Have you been?
I wish. We were planning on going, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was like, wow, in March 2020, rates to Japan were really cheap flights, but then they locked the country down. So,
there you go. It's a thing. All right, gents, thank you so much for your time. Thanks so much for the great books that not only are fun and interesting, but they're educational, and they're the best of comic books. I can't tell you guys how much I appreciate your work.
That's all the time we have for Last Comic Shop this week. Hope you enjoyed all of our great interviews, and thank you so much again to the Baltimore Comic Con for giving us the opportunity to talk to all of these wonderful creators and bring those interviews to our fans. If you want to make sure that you check out other shows that we might have done with comic book creators or just comic books we like to talk about, make sure that you get out to our website, www.lastcomicshoppodcast.com. It's a terrific place where you can rate and review and subscribe at the podcasting platform of your choice to get, again, future episodes such as this one.
And while we might be the Last Comic Shop podcast for all your podcasting needs, we don't actually want to be the Last Comic Shop. There's too many books to recommend this week, so I'm just going to say get out there to a shop near you. Get out to those conventions. Have a great time. Thanks again, Baltimore Comic Con. It was awesome stuff.
And when you're at the convention and you need something to carry all your comic books around in, why don't you check out our merch store? You can rock some Last Comic Shop merch, like a great t-shirt or a tote bag. Perfect for carrying around that deep find you found in the box back in the corner, the guy that didn't look like he'd have anything but actually had all the great stuff. You know what I'm talking about? There's always that one guy at the show. He's got the worst location but the best stuff. Go to Dave. Dave knows what he's talking about.
And also, if you want to hear some other things that we're talking about, make sure that you follow us on social media at Last Comic Shop on Twitter and on Instagram. Until next week, I was the host Andy Larson. I was joined by Chad Smith and J.A. Scott, and we hope that you stay safe, stay conning, and remember, you never should touch the cosplayers. Just don't. Do not touch cosplayers. I don't like to be touched, even though I may look like a sexy bee. I do not want to be touched. Thank you very much.
Yikes. Cosplay is not consent. Wear deodorant out there, kids. See you later.
The Last Comic Shop was a 2022 Black Angus production.